it's not quite done yet, but soon the day will reveal itself. Haraka haraka, haina baraka, as they say. Today, you have agreed to take a journey with me. Where are we going? I hear you ask. I know the past has been filled with sadness, conflict, and joy. The path littered with broken promises. What is this thing that sucks our hope and spreads our misery and poverty and attempts to kill our fire? Follow me. Follow me. And let us try and understand.
Shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako. Let's get one thing clear. Shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we.
Kuathirika kwa Kenya iwe mzuri, sisi wenyewe tujitahidi corruption hizi.
Tunawasakua hawa watu wa mbunge. Tukiwasakua wanaingia kule. Wakiingia wanapora pesa zote. Tunabaki hadharani kukula kidheri wapi? Hapa.
Corruption by its very nature is very secretive, and it doesn't leave a huge paper trail.
It is an underworld where resources are shared, where the corrupt live and make their billions.
Tunaweza endelea na kazi. Si ni watu wa bidii, lakini kazi hakuna.
Let's get one thing clear. Shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako, shauri yako we, shauri yako.
Tumetoka mbali, tunaenda mbali.
Morning, girls.
Morning, Papa.
In our headlines today, the government denies political influence in land settlement schemes.
Anything on the news today?
Same thing. These fellows are dragging their feet on the land issues, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Daddy, wait for me.
My Kenyans, sorry to begin my story with such tragedy, but tragedy is part of life. So few can remember that the first member of parliament to be assassinated in independent Kenya, Pio Gama Pinto, a man of Goan ancestry, had worked together with those seeking to free our Kenyan land from colonialism.
Harambe, harambe, tuimbe pamoja. Harambe, harambe,
More tragedies were to follow. Others like Pinto would die senselessly, and although we liberated ourselves from the colonialists, the land was never shared amongst our people. Our new leaders forgot the old saying, hatukurithi ardhi hii kutoka kwa mababu zetu, bali tumeiazima tu kutoka kwa vizazi vyetu.
Jolly good, what lovely land here. 999-year leases, I say. And what about the weather? Perfect. Just have to subjugate the natives a little.
It's very easy to, to blame the British and the governor and all those sort of people. It is true that they grabbed land in this country and allocated it to settlers and white people and so on. But you see, the tragedy of our situation is this, that once we had fought for the independence and got it, we simply inherited the laws that the governor was using. We did superficial amendments to these laws so that where it talked about the British monarch, we substituted that for the president. And therefore, immediately the president then became, in relation to land at any rate, became the king. Now, very unfortunately, 45 years after independence, that is still the law that is in our books even as we speak today.
What I think the Moi regime and the Kenyatta regime was, they redistributed the land to community representatives, but not to the community. So they chose community beneficiaries who were the politicians. What prompted me to ask a very simple question was, why do some people have so much land and others don't have anything? And we saw, after doing a lot of research in the area of Trans Nzoia, which is a small district, we concluded that there were 72,000 acres illegally allocated in one district, which is a huge, huge amount of land.
We didn't know that the rot went that deep. I mean, forests had been allocated to people without any regard whatsoever to the existing laws governing forests. Road reserves had been allocated, school plots, hospital land, police stations. The most horrifying thing about all this is that all these allocations were to people who did not actually need the land.
I did what I did to protect forests. They don't even want to recognize that. Watu nafinya mnafikiri mao maji yote yanatoka mao.
I was very surprised that President Moi would open his mouth on this particular issue, because he himself is a beneficiary of land in the Mao. He's got a tea factory in there.
when the Egyptians, Phoenicians and Persian Arabs came to the coast of Kenya. And at that time when they came, they established their own domain within the 10 miles coastal strip vis-a-vis the rule in Zanzibar, which was under the Sultan. Because the African coastal people never knew about that, instead most of the lands now were written in the names of the subjects of the Sultan. The most important land along the beach is, I may say, 100% gone.
62% of the population on the coast are still squatters, 40 years after independence. And 65% of them live below the poverty line. So there's a great connection between poverty and access to the nation's resources.
Kura yangu mimi ilikuwa ni ya kazi gani jamani? Napiga kura kwa kuwa nipate msaada, kumbe sina msaada wote.
Kwa majimbo. Wazazi wetu walikuwa wanaishi na hao wazungu hapa, kulikuwa kuna fujo. Lakini sisi new generation tukasikia uchungu sana kwa nini ardhi yetu inaenda na mabwenyenye kama hao.
Huyu bwana vile tunamuona kweli, tukimwangalia hivi anatutendea madhambi sana. Na sasa tunaomba ya serikali vile ambavyo amesema kwamba hakuna Kibaki, hakuna Raila ambaye ataweza kumkataza kupata shamba. Na anajua kuongea na mimi kwamba ninakuja dakika hii na grinder, tinga nimeweka mafuta, ninakuja kubwaga nyumba zote.
Swali langu ni, ikiwa mimi nimezaliwa hapa na sina makao, kuje mtu na karatasi aseme hapa ni kwake, hasa mimi swali langu ni pale kwangu ni wapi na watoto wangu?
Hakuna polisi ambayo inatusaidia sisi. Sasa sijui polisi hii ya shughulikia mwenye pesa ama yule ambaye hana pesa, ambaye ni maskini hawezi kumshughulikia.
Silaha yetu dakika hii ni nyinyi mlokuja mtupelekea haya malalamishi huko, kwamba haya mambo yanatendeka hapa na baadhi ya viongozi ambao wako hapa, ndio OCS, PC, DC, hawa ni watu ambao wanajua kunaendelea nini, lakini hawawezi kupeleka hizo habari huko.
Wanjiko, lini? When, Wanjiko? When? What are the rules between you and those who govern you? A wise man once said, katiba sio chombo cha serikali kuwazuia watu, bali katiba ni chombo cha watu kujilinda wenyewe.
I think the constitution we had in 1963, which you quite rightly point out was drawn up in London, wasn't so bad. But the real problem started immediately after independence, and in the very first anniversary, some major provisions were deleted, and we began this move towards the centralization of power in the hands of one person and one government, as well as the removal of safeguards.
Kenyatta was able first to use his charisma and his system of government as a president to get what he wanted, and at the same time to use the law, so that if Kenyatta wanted something and called a judge and said that is what he wanted, it's very unlikely that anybody would have been able to resist. They had the contract judges. They were able to maintain judges from the Commonwealth on contracts of maybe 3 to 5 years. Each of these judges would not want to be sent back to their home country because they'll possibly be jobless. And the one in Kenya, living well, living large, having good salaries and good facilities, they would not want to interfere in anything that would annoy the government. Moi first came to power as the underdog. Nobody expected that he was going to take the reins of power or to even be able to keep them for long. So Moi had to use totally different tactics in trying to control the judiciary. When you have such a judiciary, the people don't have confidence in regard of what their rights are and in regard of what their standing is. And once they lack that confidence, then you have a kind of an intimidated people who can do very little themselves.
I was in a school called Loreto Convent Eldoret. So when the papers, we used to read the papers on Saturdays, and a girl came and said, "Have you seen the papers? They've written that your dad is missing." And at that time, I just knew something was wrong. My mom recognized it was JM, not from his clothes. The only thing that had changed about him is that he was darker. But she says, "I knew that was JM." He actually said that if the land issue was not dealt with, we would come to have, Kenya would look like it had a coup when it really didn't have a coup. The land issue will be answered with a lot of bloodshed. He said that a long time ago.
Land is critical, and it's critical because it's still the predominant sort of source of livelihood for most of Kenya, sort of under and unemployed. People still have a sense that ancestrally they can lay claim to a certain territory, and their legitimate claim to that territory has never been recognized.
Murang'a, mimi siku kutoka Murang'a. Babu ndio alitoka Murang'a. Mimi nilitoka Banti na nilizaliwa hapo Gatiroini hapo. Mimi Murang'a hata sijui, na hatuna familia Murang'a, hatuna chochote. Sasa mtu ananiambia niende Murang'a nikaende kwa nani? Si nitaekwa tupu gani?
The land in the Rift Valley was bought from white settlers, and instead of them settling the people from whom the land had been taken from, right? Because they wanted to take the land in central Kenya, they moved the people to whom the land in central Kenya belonged and settled them in the Rift Valley. And this is the bone of contention in the Rift Valley.
Hata Mukalijini 50s yote 50s hata karibu 60s wakati mashamba yaliaja kununuliwa. Tulikuwa Wakalijini kama 4, 5. Hata hao walitoka Nandi, wengine Keyo, wengine Kipsigis. This area ulikuwa wachache. Wachache sana. Kama ni kukaa kama watu wanarudi kwao. Situasho Wakalijini 4 na wale wa Kikuyu kulikuwa huko na Muluya hiyo. Wengine si warudi bali walitoka. Tuachwe wale. Kama ni haki.
Now when the people have a shortage of land, then the politicians who are the main beneficiaries, they just bring in the whole issue of ethnicity and so on to cover up for their own misdeeds.
One of the issues that Kenyans really need to engage the public at the grassroots on the issue of land is to point out that those who are actually exploiting you in terms of land are your own leaders.
As far as the JM issue is concerned, I think it's because of impunity. The fact that these people were named and nothing was done helps others to think, well, how different am I? I'll do whatever I want and nothing will happen. Especially if you are somehow have access to either influential people, head of states, or people that are important.
Elections, elections, elections. Many unfulfilled promises that have left a bitter taste in our mouths. Why? I hear you wonder. A wise man once said, mwanasiasa hufikiri juu ya uchaguzi ujao. Kiongozi bora hufikiri juu ya kizazi kijacho. I hear you laugh mockingly. Do those who are there really care? Elections, elections, elections. The most important event that we as a people carry out together every 5 years. And, my fellow citizens, the only way to peacefully change those whom you employ to lead you. So, good people, let us begin to understand hii mambo ya uchaguzi.
The single party era, the government of the day decided on who would go to parliament or who would be the leader.
Na president wetu vile vile wa chama chetu cha KANU, yani Mheshimiwa Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi achaguliwe bila kupingwa.
There was no electoral commission. The elections were conducted by a civil servant in the office of the Attorney General. He was called supervisor of elections. And so there wasn't competition.
In most cases, yes, because they were the returning officers. And in many places, they would take sides to ensure that the candidate, maybe of the DC's liking, wins the election. The differences of the malpractices differed with every election. Come 1983, there was massive interference. Then come to 1988, there was an experiment of the Murorongo election system, which was also a sham in very many constituencies.
Corruption, we thought at the time, had gone through the roof. It was bad under Kenyatta, but it was becoming infinitely worse. There was no rule of law. Anyone could be arrested and detained.
My back was broken. The joints had been disconnected through the physical torture.
Operation Demetrius. I came to learn later on that is the system, what they call the British system of that torture has been adopted in our country here.
Political violence, which always take ethnic angles, began in 1991-92 during the advent of multi-party democracy in the country. And for the first time in the history of Moi's rule, he came face to face with resistance. I want to start by looking at the perpetrators of ethnic violence in Kenya. If you were to look at a Kiumi report and the names mentioned, you compare them with other reports like the Kikulacho report, Justice Waki's report, and you look at the names of those who have been mentioned. Basically, they are the same people.
We want to bring back the culture of due process, accountability, transparency in public office. Corruption will now cease to be a way of life in Kenya.
In 2002, it was now the end of President Moi's 2 terms. There was renewed hope that the transition may allow Kenyans to elect a different crop of leaders. This didn't actually happen. They were just the old leaders in different political parties.
The underlying general causes of what happened in 2007 have to do with all the historical injustices, marginalization and impoverization of Kenyans.
The expectations for democracy had been so increased in the previous 5 years. The democratic election of 2002, 5 years of democratic space, expectations that the election in 2007 would be a good election.
We anticipated some level of problem, but we did not expect the sort of the blowout that occurred. That took us by surprise.
2007 actually was a crossroads in the sense that it also expressed very much the end of the road for Kenya as it was since 1963.
There are always problems in any election, but the corruption, the level of corruption in Kenya is unforgivable. It's bad.
2007 was the most corrupt election I've ever observed in this country. The amounts of monies that exchanged hands were colossal sums. So there was huge uncontrolled expenditure that actually bred a lot of corruption.
It is vital that we prosecute the masterminds of the violence as well as those who committed it. If, however, we end up not doing so, then the message will be clear to the wicked ones amongst us.
The 2007 elections were very important in conveying that message that you know, corruption eventually does destroy a society. It leads to people being beheaded on the streets, and it conveyed that message not only to ordinary Kenyans but also to donors who certainly were not aware of that and had not made those links up till then.
Unless there is some movement to hold people accountable for the violence last time round, then there will be no deterrent to people doing it again next time. And that is a fundamental reform.
I'm a human resource manager of Kenya. I employ presidents, MPs, or anyone. That's who I am.
So
yes.
That's how it's going?
I'm going this way. I'll go this way.
And which way is the country going?
But the country is not moving. Yes. You don't confuse me. The country is not going anywhere. We are here to stay.
Bunge mahakama ya kisheria, majaji, rais, polisi, people, brothers and sisters. We live amongst each other. Our forefathers and mothers taught us how to protect each other, value and share. Conflicts were there, but no. Certainly not like this. Shuruti zako na majukumu yako. Je, umepiga roho yako mnada wapi? Protectors, lawmakers, leaders and friends. Look in the mirror. Yes, look closer. Then take a good look at what you see. And remember what one narrator once said. Kikulacho ki nguoni mwako. That what eats you is within you.
Parliament as an institution for a long time, particularly under the regimes before 2002, was basically an emasculated body. You know, it just bowed to the bid of the president.
So the president then got the powers of the head of government and the head of state. So there was no balancing of power at the top level.
We were a country that had one broadcaster, and the top story was always, you know, Mheshimiwa Rais, you know, the president did this today. And so you have a people who have been trained in a system of creating demigods out of the politicians.
You grow up knowing that this one guy is equals to Kenya and Kenya is equals to this guy. And, you know, we grew up, we were a generation that never knew anything else other than the president.
Serikali ya mzee inatambua kwamba wabarikiwa ni walio masikini. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall go for funerals. Mzee akisema kwamba wabarikiwa ni walio, vile mzee alisema.
To a certain extent, where we've gone wrong in this country with our parliamentarian system is that many of the incumbent politicians have had to buy their way to get their seat. When I say buy, not necessarily with cash, but in many cases with cash, but with favours, with promises. Many of them get into the House with so much debt.
Now, if you spend 200 million or 50 million in the campaign, there is no doubt that you try to get that money back. Somebody, in fact, told us that the best thing we can do while we are here is to make hay where the sun shines, eat. In fact, somebody told me that we could eat to such an extent that by the time we get out of here, we will not even be able to recognize ourselves in the mirror.
Because we do not have particularly strong social security systems, members of the public have come to rely on asking or seeking handouts from politicians. Many politicians actually, you know, jokingly refer to themselves as the ATM, the local ATM, automated teller machine, always having to give out money.
But we have to put a social net in place in this country one way or the other. And this is why I am particularly critical about what I consider unnecessary expenditures in the public service. And I simply don't accept that when you've got so many people living below the poverty line, you need to have 41 ministries.
Has our constitution enslaved us, Wanjiko? Has it been used as an instrument of oppression rather than liberation? If the people in power disregard the principles, is the constitution or any constitution worth the paper it is printed on? Remember, good people, a constitution gives you the right to pursue happiness, but you, Wanjiko, you must get hold of it first.
The benefit of what we have gone through is not just the document we are going to get. I don't even think the document is the most critical thing that we are going to get. But we've had this opportunity to talk and discuss, and people now know so much more about what a constitution is.
Please listen to me.
I'm going to give the Attorney General an advance copy of the Constitution.
As the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, I am conscious of my duty to promote, protect, and uphold the rule of law.
The Attorney General is the legal officer for the government. He's there to advise the government, and he is the one that prosecutes cases for and on behalf of the government.
His position as the lawyer of the country makes him powerful. Powerful in the sense, first, that he can prosecute anybody apart from the president. Charles Jonjo understood that power, and that made Charles Jonjo the second most powerful person after Kenyatta. People feel the Attorney Generals have failed in their mandate for one. They have protected people who should not have been protected, so that they have refused to enforce the criminal law against powerful people.
If you look at the structure of the judicial system where corruption is rampant, if you look at the Attorney General whose visa we have taken away on grounds of corruption, if you look at the entire structure, there is in essence a sort of system of impunity that is set up to ensure that the most senior officials are not held accountable.
All these militias that are there are symbolic or are an expression of the decay of the state. When Mungiki comes up, when you look at the history of Mungiki, it started off as a self-defense mechanism in the Rift Valley around the clash areas because the state was not providing security.
I think the Mungiki is sort of a microcosm of the larger problems that the youth in Kenya face today. Joblessness, a feeling of being left out in the decision-making of the country.
They were very, very quickly co-opted by the state, by individual politicians within the state.
Our organization is just an organization like any other. We have following in the police force, we have people in the military, in the civil service.
When you become accustomed to sort of making money easily off politics and you're not making, and the elections are over and your usefulness in that regard is over, then you move into extortion. And again, the extortion sort of starts, well, if there's crime in the area, let us manage crime in the area. So people willingly pay, just like we pay for private security companies.
Every time the criminal activity takes place, the police are all over the media saying the killings were carried out by Mungiki, Mungiki are extortionists. How can they continue saying that we have people out there who are extorting money from the public? They have failed.
Many of us as Kenyans don't blink when police kill people. Because as long as the police tell us that these people are criminals, we say, fine, let them get off the road, get off the streets. We have accepted as Kenyans a police force that can kill anybody on the allegation by the police themselves, who are the most untrusted institution in the country. We have given them a sense of complete impunity.
Things started happening. Beheadings were carried out and attributed to some of our members. Young people started missing, disappearing after being arrested by police officers. Others will be found murdered in forests, in the morgue.
We know cases where people have actually bought their freedom through the intimidation of the police. So those cases are there, and we have them. We've got the cell numbers, we've got the names of the police officers who are involved in this particular racket, and they all belong to one squad, the Kwekwe squad.
Kenara was the first person to advertise the names of the police officers in the Kwekwe squad. And this is when the government spokesman came out with all sorts of allegations that Oscar Foundation was funding Mungiki, Oscar Foundation was a wing of Mungiki, and they were going to deal decisively with him. The police spokesman says so. And that night, Kenara was murdered.
Kenya has a major problem of extrajudicial executions, and it's one which has not yet been adequately acknowledged and addressed.
Our police are the most, I believe they are the most underpaid. They are underpaid, and this contributes to corruption.
Some of the police accommodation was appalling. I mean, you'd find 50 families with one lavatory and that sort of thing. I mean, policemen living in their quarters.
So if the government wants to end corruption in the police force, let them pay the police officers.
Are you worried yourself about your own safety?
Yeah, you know, there comes a time then when you got to say that whatever happens, let it happen.
When an institution is corrupt, or the people who manage those institutions are corrupt or can be influenced, it means that we have lost the capacity for the rule of law. Small, hungry, poor people get to be punished, but the real people who commit crimes that undermine the rule of law and undermine democracy in this country get away with it.
There was the real damage that Goldenberg did to the economy, and it's something we took a very long time to recover from, and it literally just economically drove this country to its knees. In Goldenberg, we had almost the entire system of government working towards selfish objectives. Because of this continued failure of the law, of institutions, of the judiciary, of just about every other system, nobody had the confidence that you can stand up against this.
One day, the former president called me on the hotline and requested me to see him the following day at his Kabarak home at Nakuru at 7 a.m. I arranged Kenya shilling 3.5 million, which was in cash, my lord.
All of a sudden, during Goldenberg, the public started having fun with Kamlesh Patni. And I think he's a bit of a performer. So it almost became like this show.
Mungu asifiwe. Amen. Thank you, O Lord, our Father, for bringing these brothers and sisters from media.
It was really bizarre, even for the media, to observe the celebrity status that he developed. But it's very worrying. And it's part of this culture of that we've had for a while, where people appreciate seeing their leaders in big cars, and it excites them, and they chase them around. But that trend is changing. And following extreme suffering that people went through in the post-election phase, people are now getting angry when they see this kind of wealth.
Well, he turned up very unexpectedly. I got a warning phone call from Europe, where he was travelling at the time, and I sensed something was up because he asked me not to tell anyone else that he was going to be staying with me, without really explaining it all, talking about a naval vessel, talking about how the men in control, his ministers, his colleagues, had come to him and said, "It's us, you know, we are Anglo-Leasing." Well, it's jaw-dropping, isn't it? I mean, you've got the finance minister begging the head of the anti-corruption unit to stop investigating. You've got the justice minister trying to blackmail him into keeping silent. You've got a minister for internal security that appears to be the spider at the heart of their every web. You've got briefings with the president where he basically tells John to hold off and stop investigating. I mean, the level at which this scandal went, the complicity and the frankness of those exchanges, it's just jaw-dropping.
Anglo-leasing happened. By the time it was happening, we were dealing with a totally different scenario. At least by that time, there was a much more responsive citizenry, much more confident citizenry.
I can remember one thing I did about corruption, whereby the John Githong was standing on top of the stone written corruption, and then saying no stone will be left unturned, and he's actually standing on a big stone, and he's a very small man. Nothing has changed much, but also a lot has changed in the sense that there's more light, there's spotlight on the government.
Some major scams have been revealed. It's a shame that when it happens and the people know, so little then is done.
As we talk about reforms, I think reforms alone will not
help us achieve much. We need reforms and transformation.
Let's get one thing clear.
So it's up to us from the ground to start working. Then if there's help from the top, if we have good leaders, then they can also come in and help.
We need leaders, alternative leadership that appeals not just to the tribe, but appeals to the ideals and the values that we must hold as a country.
I believe Kenya can be there if the good governance can be there and proper way of government basically.
The freedom of speech has really been there, so we've used that to air our views in terms of the way we would want things run in this country.
Once we possibly reevaluate our philosophies, then we start looking at a different kind of country, and that is possibly what's going to take us ahead.
I think the opportunities are coming slowly because it's part of the struggle and what we are doing.
10 years to come, nataka Kenya ikuwe a better place to live, iwe ni kivutio cha watu wote, kila mtu ana feel enyewe nisipoenda Kenya sijatembea.
Kenyans, the day has now drawn to a close. For you, tomorrow is a big day. Many decisions and choices to be made. Referendums, elections, what is right and what is wrong, only you know. That which you must do. Act wisely, because you have to remember, you have only one Kenya that you and your children can call our own. Sleep well and sleep safe.
Tumetoka mbali.